right, good morning everyone. I just want to tell you guys a short story of 802.11ax or Wi-Fi 6 and contrast that with SNR and 1024 QAM. Okay. A little bit about me. I'm ECSE troubleshooting number 007. And I know David Coleman has a real hang-up on this number. David Coleman's CWNE number 4, but he's really keen on trading with David Westcott, who's number 007. So David, if you take the ECSE troubleshooting course, I'm willing to trade with you, so you can get that 007 number. Also, another number I'm proud about, I'm a member number 36 of the Scotch Malt Whisky Society of the Canadian branch. So it gives me access to really exclusive and interesting whiskeys. All right. Here's a slide chart. Many of you have probably already seen this. It has the baby RUs that we referred to. Also, you may remember from Philippe's presentation about the Pac-Man analogy. These are the many small meals that you can eat as you transfer data. To make this a little more realistic, there's also a whole bunch of null carriers that get presented within these RUs. And added on top of that, you have a whole bunch of guard bands, right, which protect you. And then to make it more accurate, as we learned in Gearman's presentation, we have that preamble that comes through, right? So the preamble going across the entire width of our 20 megahertz wide channels, right, before they get broken down into the baby RUs. Okay. Now, if we break those RUs down, we get a whole bunch of different subcarriers, right? So in an RU of 26, 2 of the subcarriers are reserved just for pilots, right? So only 24 of them are carrying data. And if we go to RUs of 52, 4 of them are reserved for those pilot carriers. Here's just a chart of the constellation charts, which you guys have already seen before, but remember, if you throw darts to this, the more complicated the modulation techniques, the more accurate you have to be with throwing your darts. This is a slide that comes from the 802.11ax charts, what they present. I just want to highlight here the SNR required to get 1024 QAM. So in the IEEE doc, they're suggesting at least 35 SNR, right? In reality, we'll probably see something a little bit more than that. And if you remember from Roel and Francois' presentation they did earlier this week, when Roel was able to see 1024 QAM, he said he was about 1 to 2 meters away from the access point, right? So it's very, very close to the access point itself. Okay. And just another representation of the received sensitivity that the IEEE is expecting that client devices will have to have in order to reach 1024 QAM. Right, this is the signal that they're anticipating you have to provide. And again, it'll likely be stronger than this. You'll need a stronger signal hitting your clients. Okay. And then if we translate this, if we start looking at the background noise, there's a whole bunch of factors that contribute to background noise. So the first one is a thermal noise, which I'll talk more about in a little bit. The next one's black body noise. So if you think of this, if you have an oven, you've turned your oven on, it's heating things up, and there's a pole punched into your oven, it's just radiating heat, right? That's sort of like black body noise. Cosmic noise is just noise that's coming from the universe. It's noise from outside Earth's atmosphere that if you have sensitive enough radios or if you point your antenna up to the sky, you can pick this up. There's also atmospheric noise. Right now, atmospheric noise was first measured and kind of categorized by Carl Jansky. And he was tasked with measuring noise that they found on transatlantic cables. So the first atmospheric noise they discovered was lightning that was close proximity to the cables. Then there was lightning that was a little bit further away. And then he also discovered a noise that was coming from outside the Earth's atmosphere. So if you guys have seen the movie Contact, Ellie Fisher's character, her role is to stare, or part of the things she did in the movie was just staring at television screens, looking for patterns in the chaos, in the random noise. Right, and the signal that they discovered, they measured it to be over 100 Janskys. Okay. Now here, if we break down thermal noise, and here we have the equation for thermal noise, it ends up kind of being a characteristic that you find in electronic circuits. All the electrons jiggling about. The rate kind of at which they jiggle about, we can calculate from Boltzmann constant, which comes from Ludwig Boltzmann. If we multiply that times the temperature in Kelvin, and then the bandwidth that we're looking at, we can figure out different noise values, right, at different points across our spectrum, right? And looking at this slide, give a bunch of different examples of 160 megahertz all the way down to 1 megahertz. The noise floors from the thermal noise that you calculated as a result of going through this calculation. So when we look at a 20 megahertz wide channel, the noise, just from looking at the width of that channel, we have a noise floor about -101. plus other background noise that we may be injecting and inserting, right? And as we double the bandwidth, we lose 3 dB of SNR, or our noise floor raises by 3 dB, right? Conversely, if you narrow the bandwidth that you're looking at, you have a gain of SNR because you're lowering your noise floor. Okay, so we got our 3 dB difference there. And then I just want to emphasize down at the bottom, the 1 megahertz and 2 megahertz, that's where Bluetooth sits. So one of the reasons Bluetooth is more resilient compared to Wi-Fi is the noise floor for the narrow channel widths that Bluetooth's looking at is much, much lower, right? So it can tolerate those noisy environments. Now the 1 megahertz is where Bluetooth operates. The 2 megahertz is where BLE operates. And Peter's going to go into much more depth on these technologies later. Okay, and then just one last slide here. This is, again, a document from the IEEE specification. These are the channel widths that the radios are allowed to operate. Okay, notice that the smallest channel width here is 20 megahertz. Okay, even though we still have baby RUs that are smaller than that, the 8 and the 4 and the 2 megahertz. Okay, what this means is that in 11AX, the smallest channel width that you can operate, that you can listen to, is 20 megahertz. So you're listening to all the noise, the thermal noise, the background noise, the black body, all that cosmic noise coming in, that's all coming across at 20 megahertz. And out of that 20 megahertz signal, you'll select the subcarriers that have been assigned to you as a client, right? But you still need to listen to the full 20 megahertz. So there is no gain, a noise floor gain by having narrow channel widths. Okay, so if we look at our takeaways from this, right? Again, you're listening to that full channel width that you've been configured to, so whether it be 20, 40, 80, 160, or an 80 plus 80. Okay? And again, you're receiving all those tones, all those subcarriers, right? So you still have the noise floor of that 20 megahertz wide channel. Okay? And then you process all those tones that are sent to you as a client. Okay? Very similar to the normal operation of Wi-Fi. You hear all the frames coming in, but your wireless NIC, its default behavior is to drop unicast frames that aren't destined to you as the receiver. You can demodulate them, but if they're not for you, you drop them. Okay? So there's no SNR gain for smaller RUs when using that narrower bandwidth. Okay? There is potential, however, and this won't be implemented unilaterally across the board, but you can transmit those RUs at higher transmit power. So it is possible on the transmission end to increase your SNR by having the transmitter increase the power. But on the receive end, we get no benefit from narrower channel widths. Okay? And that pretty much wraps up my presentation. Give a couple moments back in time. And I just want to leave you guys with this thought for Wi-Fi design, that it's a blend, it's a mix. There's part art, part science, and together, that's where we come up with our Wi-Fi designs. Thank you.